Israel is once again facing a major shock on the international diplomatic stage. This time, the blow comes from one of its closest European allies, Germany. The government in Berlin has officially announced a complete halt to arms shipments to Israel. This firm action was taken in response to the controversial plan of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is accused of intending to annex Gaza. The shocking statement was delivered directly by German Chancellor Friedrich Merz on Sunday, August 10, during a widely broadcast press conference. Citing reports from the Jerusalem Post, Merz emphasized that Germany can no longer send any weaponry that could be used in attacks against Gaza. According to her, this decision is not only a political matter, but also one of morality and humanity. She highlighted the fact that German-made weapons have been used in military operations that resulted in thousands of civilian casualties in the Palestinian territories. Merz stressed that the embargo on arms exports is a form of diplomatic pressure aimed at halting the escalation of violence. On the other hand, Netanyahu strongly denies allegations that Israel is attempting to occupy Gaza. He reiterates that the military operations conducted are aimed at liberating the territory from Hamas control. However, this statement has failed to quell the wave of international criticism. Germany's decision signals that Western allies' patience with Israel's policies is wearing thin. Experts suggest that if this trend continues, Israel risks losing critical support on the global stage, even from countries that have long stood firmly by its side. The reaction in Germany to the decision to halt arms shipments to Israel has garnered widespread attention, not only within government circles but also among the public and parliament. Chancellor Friedrich Merz faces strong pressure from various political parties demanding a tougher stance in ending military support to Israel. Heated debates have taken place in the Bundestag, Germany's parliament, focusing on the implications of this decision on bilateral relations and regional security. Most parliament members have expressed deep concern over the escalating conflict in Gaza, where recent reports indicate hundreds of thousands of civilians face death and displacement. They argue that supplying weapons to Israel at this time could further exacerbate an already severe humanitarian crisis. This pressure has reinforced the German government's conviction that halting arms exports is the right decision to maintain Germany's stability and international credibility. Meanwhile, humanitarian organizations and activist groups across Germany have organized protests and campaigns calling for a complete cessation of military aid to Israel. They argue that arms assistance has contributed to the worsening plight of the Palestinian people, particularly in Gaza, the epicenter of the prolonged conflict. This campaign enjoys broad public support from civilians increasingly critical of Germany's foreign policy. At the European Union level, the issue of halting arms exports to Israel has begun to attract serious attention. Several member states are considering following Germany's lead in adopting a firmer stance. This could mark a turning point in the complex and challenging relationship between Europe and Israel. Political analysts warn that Germany's move might trigger a domino effect, reshaping the international support map amid the Gaza crisis. The Israeli government has responded sharply to Germany's decision to halt arms shipments. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the move baseless political pressure that disregards realities on the ground. Netanyahu affirmed that the military operations underway are aimed at protecting Israeli citizens and liberating Gaza from the control of Hamas, which he considers a terrorist organization. In his statements, Netanyahu also rejected accusations that Israel intends to annex Gaza. He reiterated that the primary goal is to ensure national security and end threats posed by armed groups in the region. According to him, the military strikes are a legitimate response to rocket attacks launched by Hamas against Israeli territory. Nevertheless, global criticism of Israel's policies has not subsided. Various countries and international organizations continue to urge Israel to consider humanitarian aspects during its operations. Millions of Gaza residents trapped in the conflict zone face a worsening humanitarian crisis with limited access to essentials like water, food, and medical supplies. Political analysts believe that pressure from allies like Germany could become a turning point for Israel, as diplomatic isolation grows more evident. If other nations follow Germany's example, Israel's position in international forums could become increasingly precarious, adding to the challenges in resolving the long-standing conflict. The ongoing conflict in Gaza has caused not only political and military repercussions but also a severe social and humanitarian crisis. Thousands of civilians, including women and children, are trapped amid relentless fighting. Reports from humanitarian organizations highlight the drastic depletion of clean water, food, and medical supplies, worsening public health conditions. Homes have been destroyed, health facilities damaged, and essential infrastructure crippled due to continuous airstrikes. Many Gaza refugees seek shelter in severely overcrowded locations, facing critical shortages of basic necessities. This dire situation has sparked international solidarity movements calling for an immediate cessation of violence and unobstructed humanitarian access. Meanwhile, civilian pressure is mounting in various countries, urging their governments to take a firm stance on the conflict. Demonstrations and protests demanding peace and an end to arms shipments to the conflict zone have become increasingly frequent, reflecting the profound global concern over the crisis. The United Nations and other international bodies continue to press all parties to halt violence and seek peaceful solutions. However, the complex political and military interests involved pose significant challenges to reaching any agreement. The Arab world and neighboring countries have shown diverse reactions to the escalating Gaza conflict. Several Arab governments have strongly condemned Israel's military actions, viewing them as violations of Palestinian rights and sovereignty. Countries such as Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon have called for an immediate cessation of attacks and the opening of humanitarian corridors to aid Gaza's suffering population. Additionally, some Arab states are ramping up diplomatic pressure within international platforms like the Arab League and the UN Security Council to demand a just and lasting peace. However, formidable obstacles remain due to the geopolitical complexity and conflicting interests in the region. Public reaction in neighboring countries has been intense, with widespread protests and rallies expressing solidarity with the Palestinian cause. This popular pressure influences government policies and their diplomatic responses to the crisis. At the same time, some neighboring nations remain cautious in escalating their involvement to avoid being drawn into a broader regional conflict. Their preference remains diplomatic engagement and negotiation to ease tensions. The United States, as Israel's primary ally, has also responded to Germany's decision and the intensifying Gaza conflict. The U.S. government reaffirmed Israel's right to defend itself against attacks from Hamas militants, but simultaneously called for minimizing humanitarian impacts and pursuing a long-term peaceful resolution. President and senior officials have publicly expressed concern over rising civilian casualties and called for an immediate ceasefire. America seeks to play a diplomatic mediator role, urging restraint and dialogue between both parties. Meanwhile, other Western countries have varied responses. Some strongly support Israel, while others consider increasing diplomatic pressure to prevent further military escalation and worsening humanitarian conditions. Political analysts note that divisions among Western allies could influence the continuation of military and political support for Israel. Germany's stance marks an important shift that could reshape the conflict's diplomatic landscape and global strategy. Recent developments on the ground paint a grim picture in Gaza. Ongoing airstrikes and military operations have caused widespread destruction of critical infrastructure, including hospitals, schools, and public facilities. Civilians trapped in the conflict zone face severe threats to their safety and survival. Many families have fled to overcrowded shelters with limited capacity. Public health conditions are deteriorating rapidly due to restricted access to medical care and essential medicines. Humanitarian organizations warn that without an immediate ceasefire, the crisis could spiral into an uncontrollable catastrophe. Besides physical devastation, psychological trauma affects especially children who witness violence firsthand. Psychologists stress the urgent need for psychosocial support to prevent deep emotional scars that could perpetuate future conflicts. International efforts to open humanitarian corridors continue despite security challenges. All parties are urged to reach an agreement swiftly to alleviate Gaza's suffering and pave the way for peace. In conclusion, Germany's decision to halt arms shipments to Israel marks a new chapter in the political and military dynamics of the Middle East conflict. This move reflects deep concerns over the humanitarian situation in Gaza and indicates a significant shift in international support for Israel. Such changes in allies' attitudes could encourage other countries to reassess their positions on the conflict. Increasing diplomatic pressure has the potential to foster a ceasefire and long-awaited peace talks. However, significant challenges remain given the long-standing complexity of the dispute. The human toll is undeniable, with millions of civilians bearing the brunt of escalating violence. Therefore, the international community must persist in pursuing just and sustainable solutions to end the prolonged suffering.